Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to My First Business, the podcast. I'm your host, Naeem Pervez, and I'm a relatively new and sometimes clueless business owner. And I wanted to talk to seasoned entrepreneurs to help guide me and inspire me and help me understand the best way to grow my own business. So what mistakes to avoid, how to overcome common challenges, how to identify opportunities, and that's why I created the show for you, dear listener. So if you're new to business or old, I don't care, I'm not an ageist. I bring on guests from all sorts of industries and they are full of wisdom that you'll chew right up. And each episode is going to be like a conversation with a mentor that you never had. My guest today is Wahaj Siddiqui. So picture this, you're at the famous Exit Cafe in Dubai at 2 a.m. In the corner, you see a skinny, unassuming Pakistani man with wireframe glasses, busily typing away on his laptop. And you'd probably think he's a gamer. In fact, he's the CEO of Oblique Consult, one of the fastest growing financial advisory firms in the MENA region and former head of Indirect Tax at Emirates Airlines. What started as a one-man on his laptop at a shisha cafe is now a seven-figure business headquartered in downtown Dubai, servicing the UAE, Oman, Bahrain, Kuwait and Saudi Arabia with a 100% client retention rate. He's calm, he's humble, he's positive. Listening to Wahaj is part podcast and a part meditation. So in this episode of My First Business, Wahaj and I will discuss how to maximize the value from your 9-to-5 job, how to know when to take the leap, making wisdom exponential with networking, aggressive decision making, hiring and incentivizing employees the right way, when to let go and giving up operations control to grow, 2 secrets to never losing a client, and leaning into positivity and intuition. I've known Wahaj since we were teenagers and we have all had that friend we knew would never stop hustling. I've had the pleasure of not only being his friend, but also colleagues as he hired me as one of his first employees in his first business. So it only makes sense he's one of the first guests on my podcast. Without further ado, enjoy my part meditation, part conversation with Wahaj. Wahaj, welcome.
Thanks, Naeem.
Thanks for coming on My First Business. I'm glad to have you here. I've seen you in so many phases of my life, and it's good to get you here as well. I want to start off with your first impression of me. The first time we met, how much of a loser did you think I was?
On a scale of 1 to 10?
Yeah.
1 being the lowest?
Yep.
0.
No, if you can tell the story of how we first met.
Yeah, I think as far as I recall, the first time I saw you was when I was half asleep. I'd just woken up, which is not a good time to be around me. And I think you got fired the first day.
I did.
And I was first of all annoyed that you had to wake me up, and also was very concerned how someone gets fired on their first day on the job.
I wanted to bring that story up because that was about 15, 20 years ago, and there's a lot of transformation that I've seen in you, and I think you've seen in me as well. And one of the biggest transformation is that we've both now become business owners. The difference being that I am still figuring my way out, and I guess you are as well, but I think you're a few years ahead of me. And I wanted to have you here to kind of part some clouds in my mind for me, give me some advice, and also gives you a chance to think about your own doubts and fears that you're currently having as well. So before we get into business though, for our guests, can you let us know who was Wahaj growing up? What was your family situation like? Where were you? What city were you? What kept you busy? And what were your surroundings like? What was the early Wahaj like?
I think the early Wahaj was a bit different than who you see today. I was very academically charged, and I think I probably wasn't a straight A student, but I was someone who did focus a lot on studies, which has changed drastically ever since I started my professional career. I was into sports, which I'm not anymore. But yeah, growing up, I think I'm born and raised in Abu Dhabi. Spent most of my life there. I moved to Dubai in 2015. We're a small family of 4, 1 sibling and parents. We're a very close-knit family, so family had a lot of influence on the upbringing and all. But obviously, as you grow up, other people, other mentors, bosses, peers, colleagues influence a lot of you. So I started my career with KPMG in Abu Dhabi, moving to Etihad Airways after 3 years, and then 2.5 or 3 years with Etihad Airways, moved to Halal Bank, did my MBA in between. Part of it was while I was working for Etihad, part of it was full-time. And then in 2015, I moved to Emirates as the head of indirect tax for the airline.
Very cool. And all of these experiences were coupled with, I'm guessing, lots of moments where you wanted to break out on your own, right? And I remember this one time, I think it was, again, about more than 10, 12 years ago, where you wanted to start a t-shirt business.
Oh, yeah. I remember that. I still remember the name. I think it was called Arab Tea. And
what was the concept?
So the concept was to have bold t-shirts and t-shirts that sort of celebrate the GCC or UAE to be specific. Because at that point, and maybe up until now, although I haven't done my research, but there was no brand that was synonymous with UAE or created in the UAE. So we wanted to be one of the first that did that. But yeah, the entrepreneurship passion has been probably in me since I was in school. I remember telling my father a lot of times, like, we should do 1, 2, 3, we should start something, we should do this, and you should quit your job. And obviously that's, as a child, you don't really see a lot of realities. And maybe in hindsight, that wasn't the best time to start. But yeah, it's something that sort of has always been in my mind. But I was often told by people ahead of me that you should start off your career with a job in a professional life. Teaches you a lot. And I think that's very true. I would have been a very different person had I not been into that circuit for about 12 years.
Yeah, it's synonymous with saying, like, you can learn with other people's money. Why learn from your own mistakes? When you're doing a job, you're getting a salary, but you're learning from other people. You're getting paid to learn.
Yeah, that is true. I think the learning is exceptional, right? You work in these large organizations, you get exposed to so many things, so many people. So you're always learning people management, how to talk to different people. You're always learning time management because there's various sorts of pressures and all. And it's a bit different when you enter the entrepreneurship circuit. But all of these little pieces sort of come together to sort of build a strong foundation for you to sort of jump on.
Absolutely.
So that's something that I feel is very important and has greatly helped me.
Absolutely. Now, just to contrast, all the way from Arab tea to now, can you tell us what you do now? If you meet someone at a party and you have to describe who you are professionally and what you do, how would you describe your current business venture or ventures? What would you say?
So first of all, I'd say I don't go to parties. But on a serious note, we provide accounting services and tax services across the GCC region. So we started off with UAE, moved into Bahrain, moved into Saudi, most recently Kuwait and Oman, and we're planning a move towards Qatar shortly. So we should have the entire GCC covered. So we do accounting for a lot of high-powered startups that need either a landing pad here, and they're based out of Silicon Valley or UK or Europe, other places in the world, or even local startups that have gone through the accelerators here, the IFC FinTech Hives or ADGM's accelerators. So that's one of our offerings. The other bit that we do is tax for a lot of government and MNC entities. UAE just has indirect tax, but some other regions have direct tax as well, which is corporate tax or zakat as applicable. So these are two of our main offerings. And then in addition to that, we also have services like business process reengineerings, health checks, internal audit services, which are risk management. But we're trying to test out all of those and sort of expand the breadth of our service offering today.
Very cool. And it's always evolving as I've seen it. It's not like all of these businesses came into fruition all at once. I want to talk about the start, right? This is Oblique Consult, OPCO, as known to those who love it. When it was getting started, it was probably the first time that you went all into a business. So I want to understand that time a little better. What were your considerations, your doubts, your fears? How did you measure the opportunity at hand versus the risk at hand? How did you make that decision given all the forces that were acting around you? Was there a rough framework that you were using? Was it just gut feeling? Was it a mix of both? Can you describe that time when you were thinking of jumping fully into it?
Interesting question. So everyone has their version of a framework, or everyone has their own version of how you should decide whether you want to jump in or not. And I don't know if mine was right or wrong, but I can share some details. So I have been exposed to tax in the region for about 6 years. One of the few people, I guess, in the region that have done tax. And when VAT was coming along and I was part of the committee that was advising the government, I thought that this would be a good idea as a natural transition out. Also in terms of timing, because the market would be wide open and there'd be fewer experts in the market. So from a timing standpoint, it made sense. It reduced the risk that I would have taken otherwise. So those were my thought processes on starting this out. In terms of what was going through my mind, obviously, when you work for MNCs for a while, you work in professional organizations, you're paid on the 25th or the 30th of the month, you have that paycheck coming in and you're hopefully growing. It's not always an easy decision. But I think I've been someone who's always driven by value on how I can change things around me and how I can improve them. So that sort of made the decision easier for me to switch out of the professional 9 to 5 and do something of my own and feel that tangible effect growing up. So I was prepared, if something does go down, I'd at least have the satisfaction of trying and giving it a shot.
Right. So you're open to the fact that you could be failing.
Oh, yeah, I was 100%. But I also thought that if I had one foot in the door and one foot out, I would probably not give it my 100%. And then it had a higher chance of failure than success. So I thought I'll quit my job at Emirates, do this on my own and sort of see what happens. And if not, hopefully I've built a good reputation for me to get back into the circuit. But thankfully things worked out really well. So I don't think I felt the need.
There was a measured risk in the sort that you had a parachute, a backup plan, that you're still employable, you're still valuable in the marketplace. But at the same time, I think you're one of those people that once you took the ship out, you would like to burn the bridges and not give yourself the option to go back and really, really try to make it work as much as you can. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I was pretty confident that probably would land a job if I had to get back, but I wasn't looking forward to it. So I wanted this to work because I wanted this to be my own thing. Also, one of the driving factors was that I think I've been a sort of a different employee throughout my life, and given my sleeping patterns, my working habits and all, something that you know better than most other people do. So I like to wake up at my own time. I like to function at my own time. I'm very active and productive at night. I'm very active and productive when I'm having a shisha. That's something that not a lot of people understand, right? We're still, this market is still very driven by the confines of time and punctuality and who's coming in when and so on. And I wanted that to be more result oriented.
I absolutely love that you brought that up, because it was my second question about starting out. It's not always about the opportunity in the market or the money, but it's lifestyle focused as well. There's a way we want to live. How much time do we have left here? Probably 40, 50 years. And there's a certain way we see ourselves living. And what the alternative is, which is the 9 to 5, the reporting to the meetings, not being able to exponentially grow, and not on our own terms, is super important. And it's a big consideration for Alina and I as I started as well. Yes, there was an opportunity. Yes, there was a market. Yes, there's clients asking to pay us to do what we do. But at the same time, we get to be, it's a very, I don't want to say we get to be our own boss, but I would rather say we get to be productive at the space at the time that we want to be, right? Whether it's physical space or physical time. So I have told your story, multiple people, as an inspiration as well, that, at the end of the day, and you drilled this into me as well when we work together, about end result. How you get there, it's your damn problem. But will I get the end result? If you've given me a date, will it happen by the date? If you've given me a certain quality you expect, will I get the certain quality? How and where it happens, you figure it out. I'm not going to hold you fully accountable for that. So I love that. Last thing about the starting point. How did people in your life react to it? So people, meaning friends and family, what was the chats you were having with them? How were they reacting and responding to your decision?
So I think most people were super supportive. My dad, for example, who's someone I look towards for advice. So I think he'd realized that every few months I'd go to him with a plan and he'd shut me down. So I think in his head, he sort of knew that at some point he has to say yes. And I think when VAT was coming along, he also realized this would be a good, smooth transition. And if not now, then maybe nobody knows when. But so my parents were pretty supportive, although a bit concerned. Most of my mentors and friends were also very supportive, but there were a lot of people who did say, well, why are you leaving a job at Emirates with a growth projection? Because I was one of the youngest heads, I believe, if not the youngest. So everyone sort of felt like that was something that was uncalled for, or I should have spent more time. But the fact was that I sort of saw a lot more value in what I was about to do rather than what I was doing today. And that sort of drove my decision. Also, I'm sort of the person who looks to others for advice, but I gather everything in my head, try and minimize the risk and do what I believe to be true. So while the feedback of people who were a bit negative did not really impact me, I tried to cover the risks that they mentioned would probably come along. But most of the people were pretty supportive, and they still are till today.
Right. So it's not like you have to go out and prove anyone wrong. Most of the people are already cheering you on and hoping for your success.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, except for a couple of dad's friends, but everyone else thankfully had been quite supportive.
Yeah, uncles, if you're listening. This is a great segue, because the next topic I did want to jump into was mentorship and guides and influences. And the reason I wanted to talk to you about it is that I have always seen you actively use this as a resource for yourself. It's like the wind beneath your wings. You always have a network of wiser, smarter, older people around you. Since we were young teenagers as well, I noticed that about you. And I think that's really brilliant on how you actually utilize this relationship. How do you feel about your mentors in terms of being able to find the right one, being able to listen to what they're saying, understand what they're saying? Do you take advice from multiple people? Do you have one fixed person you always go to? How do you view those relationships in general?
So, like you said, I've always been someone who's had a lot of older and wise people around, and I've been blessed to have a lot of great bosses, a lot of great mentors outside of my workplace, people that I just connected with by chance, and with time they sort of made me into who I am today. So I've always surrounded myself with those people. I think everyone has their own strengths. So I don't look towards one particular person unless, after you spend a lot of time with someone, you sort of understand someone has great negotiation skills, someone's got great technical skills, someone's got a great vision, someone can really motivate and charge you. And then you start using them. But I think if I was to talk about general business advice, there's a lot of people that I look towards and I on a regular basis seek advice from. I think the biggest mentor in my life is a cousin of mine, Daniel, who I constantly reach out to when it comes to negotiation, when it comes to the future of the business. And he's someone who sort of understands me, so he can channel my thoughts much better than I can, and extract them out of my head and then relay them out, roll them out as a plan. And there's lots of other mentors, people who are senior stalwarts in the accounting and tax business, who tell me when I'm swaying away from the business model or when I'm doing something that's too adventurous. They sort of try and explain the risk to me. So it's something that I've done, and I think I will continue to do, because it's easier to learn from someone else's experiences rather than going through it yourself, especially when you're a small business, because you've got a very limited room to experiment. So using someone else's wisdom, I think, is a good idea.
100%. I think in my life, I have you, which is I'm very grateful for, because through you, it opens up a whole network, right? Because you have this shared knowledge from a lot of different, let's call it your personal board of directors that are present in your life. So I'm actually cheating here by asking you questions, because you've already asked these questions to 10 other people, and you've collated the answers and figure out what the best thing is. And my favorite part about how you offer advice is you never make my decision for me, which I think your mentors do for you as well. They don't make your decision for you. They lay out the facts, the pros and the cons. Like that's every time we talk, it's like pros ye hain. Well, that's Urdu. These are the pros. These are the cons. It's up to you and what you do. Do you find how do you find your decision making? Has it changed since you first started the business up to now? Do you take more risks? Do you do more analysis? Do you do less? Do you listen to your gut? How do you go about making certain long-term decisions?
So let's take a step back. So my decision making was really quick when I was in my professional career. I was often told by my bosses that I'm very quick to revert to emails with a decision, not just replying to an email, but actually deciding and saying, yeah, go ahead, or don't do this. And I wouldn't sleep over even the bigger decisions. And thankfully, none of them went wrong. But this is something that I sort of realize in hindsight that is something I should have done or paid more attention or thought to. But yeah, I was lucky. None of them really went wrong. When I started my business, because you start off really small, you have no idea of the future. You tend to be very, very careful about everything, and you're looking into each segment very, very closely with a magnifying glass. How I'm going to do my hiring, how you're going to have the next round of fundraising, or how you're going to raise money for future growth, salaries, where's the money going to come from, how you're going to generate new business, and so on. So you're very careful.
The stakes are higher.
Absolutely. So you're very careful about everything, and you try and be very, very accommodating. But as you get older in the business, you realize that you've got a certain skill set, and you've got that USP, which people have now started to acknowledge and feel that, this company sort of stands apart. That's something, thankfully, we were able to develop and deliver, and clients could feel it. So with time, you sort of become a bit more aggressive. Even in terms of expansion, because you've got a solid platform that you're building on. So, if you have to scale back, you can. Not ideal, but you still can scale back. So you become a bit more adventurous. So in about 3.5 years that I've done this, I think today, first of all, I've got a team that is very, very solid. So they offer a lot of support, which enables me to focus on my thoughts for the future rather than just be involved in everything. And secondly, I think it enables me to take more risks, be a bit more adventurous, explore new markets and territories, explore new business ideas within this same business, offer new products, talk to people on what they want, listen to them, listen to what the market has to say, and where it's headed. So yeah, the decision making has sort of become a bit more aggressive. And at the same time, you've got this mental calculator, which is always calculating in your head on, what you should be doing, and so on. So,
no, absolutely. I want to talk about that a bit more towards the end, but there is something in there you mentioned that actually helps me move on to the next topic of discussion. Again, something that I have seen you evolve over time. It's your hiring and your management style of your team, right? There's being very generic, and here's a preamble. Being very generalizing a lot. There's two kinds of business owners. There is the technical person who knows a skill or a trade that becomes really good at it to offer it as a service and then starts a business because of that. Or there is a non-technical business person who's strategic and finds technical people to fulfill the service or the product and deliver the product and go after the opportunities in the market that way. I think you started off as a mix of both, right? But more, would you say you started off more as a technical lead or the business lead of the business?
I think I was doing both, like you mentioned. But if I was to pick, I think I was doing the technical far more than the business. And I think you've often mentioned that I've got some natural relationship skills. So I guess that sort of helped along the way. But I think I was far more tilted towards the technical side than the business side.
And has that, I guess that's changed now, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the one thing is that you mentioned that you're able to be more aggressive with your decision making because your team is managing the day to day. And you've essentially replaced yourself or cloned yourself. And I think you've done it fantastically. How many employees are you today?
So we're about 12.
12. We met for the business when it started was 2.
Yeah.
So it's 6x.
Yeah,
Big time.
6 times.
What have you learned in terms of, first, number one, hiring people? Has your criteria changed? Do you look at people differently? Have you learned from any of the mistakes? And secondly, once you have hired, how do you figure out the winners and the losers from those people?
Good question. So I think hiring is one of the toughest things you can do as a business owner. Because there's a lot of good talent here. There's no doubt about it. There's lots of smart people, sharp people around. But what's most important is someone who sort of shares the same vision and passion that you do, so that your offering towards your clients remain consistent, and they see that passion, they see that same vision. And that's something that's really hard, and we still struggle with it today. And we have a hard time in finding the exact right mix. So we try and do our best, but often we spend perhaps 2 months just looking for an associate level position, which is not very efficient. But we've learned from our past mistakes. And in the past, we became a bit more experimental, and we said, why not try someone, who we know is not a great fit, but who might be a good fit. And while they were okay in terms of performance, they didn't share that same passion and vision. So you were always at sort of this position where you're like, he's doing an okay job, but he's not building that same relationship with clients or bringing out that same passion that you do, which clients really appreciate, or trying to go out of the way because he believes in delivering value. As a setup, what we do is everyone on the team is really, really hardworking. They perform really well, but obviously we've got a top tier cream, and we try and make sure they're heavily rewarded so that they don't have to look elsewhere. So we've got a very consistent bonus scheme that we try and offer, which we did even during COVID times. Nobody was laid off, nobody had pay cuts or anything of that sort. Instead, we offered bonuses to existing employees because they were working really hard to make sure we were able to deliver what we've promised to our clients. So I think that's something that sort of sets us apart. Also, we tend to recognize efforts put in by individual team members very, very vocally. And I think that goes a long way in making them realize that they're an important member of the team. So these are some little bits of action items that we sort of try and do to retain employees.
And most of the people that you hire, obviously you hire them for their technical expertise first because the work needs to be done, right? That needs to be all the boxes need to be checked in terms of fulfilling the services that you're selling to the clients. But the thing that, the similar thing that in our business, we're a marketing agency or an advertising agency, we have an abundant pool of people to choose from that know how to do the technical stuff. But what sets us apart so far is similar to you, is that we have two founders, Alina and myself, who are the relationship experts in the business in terms of having that deal with the clients, negotiating with them, talking them off the ledge, meeting up, chatting with them socially, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we do find younger kids who are not very well attuned to those kind of things. And their responsibility sometimes could stop just at their bosses. So as long as we do what the bosses have told us, that's fine. Whereas what we want to build is someone who takes the client relationship on completely and away from us, because it, again, just like you, gives us more time to be more aggressive with our second venture, our third venture, our fourth venture, and experiment and explore and take time out to meet people and discuss new opportunities. But is there a way that you bring them up to that level in terms of client servicing? Is there a sort of training that you do with them? Do you just let them watch you and you ask them to replicate it? How have you started to let go, if you have, of your client relationships and rely more on your team to manage the client relationship on a daily basis?
So I have actually done that, because as your team grows and as your business grows across various countries, across various offerings, you can't, be involved with each and every aspect of the business, each and every email, each and every feedback that's given to clients, or each and every report that's submitted to the client. So while I do have a pulse on everything, I have started to sort of give up control. The way to do that is find your top performers, monitor them while they become experimental or adventurous, and coach them into your sort of mindset so that they continue the Oblique offering or digital Lena offering in your case. And you sort of reward the wins that they get, and you coach when they've lost, and they will make mistakes. But eventually what will happen is, over a period of a few years, they sort of learn from those mistakes, and they start doing what you truly want them to do. It may not always be 100%, but then it allows you to free up your time and focus on other initiatives, like you said. And it also gives the younger kids a chance to sort of come up and, be the face of the business rather than just two people running the business. Yeah. So you've got a system that sort of starts to sustain itself beyond just the founders itself.
So in terms of like the one thing that stops us from fully going there is quality control, right? And that's, you mentioned coaching the mistakes. How did you find yourself becoming comfortable with juniors making blunders that can affect long-term your relationship with a client? Or, the word spreads in the market, right? If you submit poor quality work to your client, that stuff can spread. So part of our paranoia, maybe you had it initially, is to look at everything that's going out to the client, or to be in every meeting with the client to make sure nothing is going wrong. How did you find yourself letting go? Like, how do you get comfortable? I'm asking because we're still stuck in that point where we can trust our juniors, but there's something within us that's holding us back. We want to be involved like 100%. How do you let go? Like, what can you say to me to help me make that transition if I'm able to?
So it's not an overnight process, right? It took me a while to get there. And it does require some courage to be able to trust someone else completely. But you give it a lot of time. So I spent a couple of years in sort of building that team, in monitoring them. And then when they start off, for the first few months, you're looking at each and everything they're doing. And then gradually you let go of the steering wheel and you sort of, stop looking at 10% of the minor things. And you realize that even if there was a worst case scenario in those little things, it won't impact you too adversely. And then with time, when you have that trust built up and you align in terms of your methodologies on how to do something, you sort of know that, well, he's about 80, 90% there. So you get more and more comfortable with time. Having said that, there would always be a possibility of blunders, of mistakes, of something going wrong. And that has happened with us in the past. One of the things that we do is we don't try and hide or conceal those mistakes. We own up to them in front of our clients, and I take responsibility as a leader of the firm. So nobody on the client side would find out who did it, except they know it's Wahaj Siddiqui's team or Oblique's team, and in some cases might even be me. And that's something that people sort of realize and acknowledge, so they work harder and harder to make sure it doesn't happen again. And on the client side, they appreciate the transparency and the honesty, that there's no deflection or there's no blame game. There's an acknowledgement of an error that's been made. And that sort of reinforces their trust that, you know, we will do everything it takes to revive that trust and get back on whatever pedestal they want us to sit on.
Yeah. See, I have experience with this in my corporate life, right? What you're describing, having that autonomy in the job to be able to deal with a client in the way that I thought was best. But the stakes were different, right? So when you're in sales and account management roles, you have targets, you have dollar and fixed targets. So what management, and they're able to let go and let you devise your own systems and your own routines and your own methodology, because they know in 6 months, if you're not close to your target, you're gone, right? So the protection for them was like, okay, maybe a poor salesman or a poor account manager can make our company look bad, but we won't make it look bad for too long. You know, there's a revolving door policy. If you're not making your targets, then you're out. If you're making your targets, then whatever you're doing is working. Keep doing more of that. So whatever style you've come up with, there's no company persona. There will be some values shared within the company that over time, when the same people kind of stick around for years, you start developing a culture of like whatever it is, your hustle or your ethics or what that starts developing organically. But when we try to do that for people that don't have revenue targets, it becomes different. So how do you derive your bonus structures? Is it based on performance metrics that you've come up with? Is it based on size of business that they're handling?
So there's a couple of ways that we do that. One of them is an annual bonus, which everyone gets based on their performance. How we measure that performance is, while we're not super structured, but everyone sort of has their own indicative KPIs that they have to meet. So let's call it a more refined version of a JD and something in between a JD and a KPI. So everyone sort of has that list going on throughout the year. If they overachieve that, which is very doable because we have an addition of 2 clients every month, so it's up to individual members to pick up various clients, pick up various tasks, and grow in their own space. So if they're able to do that, we reward them. That's an annual bonus scheme structure. Often we get heavily pressurized because we get, instead of 2 new clients, we'll probably get 5 new assignments in a month, or we'll have a pressure situation. There's a system migration going on for a client of ours, and we need to step up and help them out. People who do step up and go over and above, we reward them to encourage them to continue to do that, because that's something the clients also truly appreciate. Not everything is part of our engagement letter, and not everything is always billed, but that's one of our USPs that, you know, will be the most reliable partner that you have. And if my team shows me that reliability, then just like how the client rewards me, I reward them. So it's an ongoing process, and you continuously evolve and you continuously learn. But yeah, those are some things we do today.
That's giving me a lot of ideas, which I'm putting aside for a chat later at Shisha. But let's talk about partners for a second, right? Obviously, people, I think, are a big part of business, whether employees, clients, or partners. How do you find working with your partners? How are they involved in your decision making? What kind of frameworks do you guys have? What's formalized? What's not formalized? How has it been in the last, ever since you've started? Has that evolved over time too? What's your general thoughts on the partnership that you have right now with the other partners?
So I think we all of us are friends. So while we do have sort of a high level agreement, which we call a disagreement, because the only time it comes out is if there's a disagreement. And thankfully, in the past 3.5 years, it's never come out. But that's the only thing that's documented. I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of support and a lot of flexibility, a lot of autonomy to do whatever I want. And I take most of the decisions in consultation with a partner of mine, Saad. He's my sounding board for 90% of the decisions that we make, including the senior recruitments. So we have each other to bounce ideas off. He's also technically very sound, so he gives me a different perspective often to think about. But the partners are pretty much in sync with each other. They give me a lot of control. We do have board meetings on and off while they're not very scheduled, but we have discussions and eventually it is my call. So everyone discusses what's at stake. Everyone will list out the pros and cons, but they'll give me the mic to take the decision at the end of the day and they'll back me on it. However, most recently we've, and it's under process, it's almost concluded, we sold about 28% of our equity. And we raised funds for a massive expansion plan across the region, within the UAE. So things are going to get a bit more formalized now. But the new people on board are also very similar minded. Working with them feels like an extension of who I am. And that's why it seemed like a natural sort of transition to work with those people. Because I know they will enable us to achieve heights which we might be doing a bit more slowly if we were to do it organically. So far it's been great. We all are pretty close to each other. Everyone understands that this is a bit of a different business. So yeah, I've got a lot of support, thankfully.
Good. And let's talk about some really tough times for Oblique. Was there, and you can tell me if there was or wasn't, but have there been nights or moments in time where you wanted to, you're just staring at the palm of your hands and you're wondering what to do. You're stuck. There's no way forward. Everything looks dark. Did it ever go that bleak for you? Or what's the closest you've been to like the biggest, darkest moment for this, and how did you get out of it?
So I'm by nature a very positive person. I don't think I've been through that side, or I haven't noticed it like other people would. I mean, there's always roadblocks in your way, but you sort of take a step back, come think about it the next day, or go and have shisha and think about it. That's usually my go-to hobby. But I mean, if I was to pick one instance, I would probably pick out a time when when we'd had a couple of resignations. People were going to different opportunities, and great opportunities for them. Unfortunately, I couldn't offer them better at that point, which is why I obviously had to support them in achieving those new opportunities. But that sort of put me in a position where I was suddenly, left with, instead of 4, I think I was left with 2 people. So we had to overcome that, and we had to pull in a lot of late nights. But we managed to brace through that quite comfortably, to be honest. So when it started, it did give me nightmares, but we sailed through it. The rest of the 2 guys were pretty sharp. They made it happen.
I bring this up because I knew exactly you were going to respond like that. With most of the challenges I've seen you in, you have this very calm demeanor about everything. You look like you're silent. You look like there's a lot of thoughts going in your head, but on the outside, you look like Buddha. It takes a lot to phase you, or to anger you, or to test your patience, or to bring you down. I feel like there's always a calculation going in your mind about, okay, where's the silver lining in all of this? Okay, if this is the game, then how do I play it? Like, the cards have been dealt. Now there's no point complaining about which cards I got. Let's play a hand and let's move on. Let's think of like next step. And that's like completely admirable. But on the other side then, forget the dark and the down stuff, but what was the first win that you had with Oblique that you felt like, okay, this business has legs? this is going to work. This is a proof that this thing is going to go somewhere. What would you define that first moment of clarity? Where do you think it was?
I think when we started landing our first few clients, we started going on a roll, and our revenue streams were okay. I think there were two important wins. One of them was a Fortune 100 company, I'm not sure, Estee Lauder. We were managing a subsidiary of theirs. We were managing tax, for a subsidiary of theirs. And we noticed some things that, in passing, I mentioned to the firm a couple of times. And I think around the third or the fourth time, they called me and then they said, what's going on? You give us advice, and we've been given another advice by one of the big four entities. So we don't know who to trust. And then I pulled out the law book and I said, well, this is what I'm referring to. And the next time it happened, we were just asked to give them an engagement letter, and they got rid of the other big four that was doing it for them. And then eventually we ended up winning Bahrain. We ended up winning Saudi Arabia. We're now also doing Kuwait for them. And hopefully as we open in Qatar, we'll also take over Qatar. So that was probably one of the biggest wins, a giant size company getting rid of a big four, and trying to work with us. And we had to sort of prove ourselves. So our first year fee was extremely low, but the next year we doubled it, and they were happy. They didn't bat an eyelid, and they said, go for it. That was a big win. I think in addition to that was us breaking even in about 6 or 7 months. So we've been profitable on accrual basis. We've been cash flow positive, which is a bit rare in the startup industry here. When you look at things, because we work with a lot of startups, but we've been very profitable from the first year. We've been cash flow positive as well. So we've never had to go out for capital call or for a shareholder loan or for bank finance or anything. So I think these two are pretty big wins, and we've sort of grown from where we started, and we've about 4 or 5 times multiplied our revenue.
And 6 times the team.
Yeah, 6 times the team.
Is especially in your line of work, right? It's hard to scale your revenue without scaling the team. There's always a capacity that you hit. How do you manage the increase in client versus the increase in employees, especially with the fact that you can scale up your employees, but your client retainers might, dwindle in the course of a month? You can lose 5 clients, for example. How do you go through that scenario? Do you do any scenario analysis, or you just go with the gut and take it as it comes?
So I think I'm more on the take it as it comes side than an analysis and constantly thinking about risk management, because I think that sort of prevents you from building a team for the long term, right? Because you're always thinking about what happens 3 months from now, 6 months from now. But what we try and do is, and as unfortunate as it is, the team is usually understaffed. So we don't have fat at any given point. So even if I have a couple of clients going out, I still am not very adversely impacted. Unless, like you said, maybe 5 or 6 of them go away, then I might have a bit of an issue. But hopefully that won't happen. And it hasn't happened. Our client retention rate has been 100% so far. So it's fine. And what we try and do is everyone has to manage at least, or be involved, if not manages for senior people, but everyone has to be involved with at least 5 to 6 engagements at any given point of time. So if that isn't happening, then either that person is falling short, or the assignment or the engagement is very complex and advanced, and then I need to deploy more senior people on it. So that's sort of how I manage and look at things. And I also believe that while I may have an instance of a couple of clients exiting, I'll also perhaps have more clients entering. So positivity again sort of keeps me going.
No, you said something in passing which I think is pretty huge. Your client retention is 100%?
Yes, except one company that was acquired by another larger firm, and they already had their own tax unit. Aside from that, we've been at 100%.
So you've never lost a client based on performance issues or anything like that? It was just like a macro decision that was made. How? What do you think is a secret sauce for you? Like, why that's a very good number for your firm, for your industry, or any industry at all. What would you point to? What are those things that enable you to have those kind of retention numbers?
I think the first and foremost thing is the technical skill set. So everyone's sort of aware that we've got that depth of tax knowledge and accounting knowledge, and we take ownership of whatever we're doing. So we don't have a separate fee structure if we were to go to the tax authorities and convince them of something, which is a bit of a shift from what other companies do. They have a lot of disclaimers in place. We don't have those things. We take responsibility for compliance if we're dealing with you. So people sort of trust us, and we've got the credentials as well as the history to show for it. So we've been audited, we've been reviewed, we've been inspected. When I say we, a lot of our clients, and thankfully none of my clients have ever been penalized for a tax dispute, or none of them have received a tax notice. We've also gotten into arbitrations with other tax authorities, not within UAE, and we've won those arbitrations. So I think that sort of gives people the comfort that, we take that whole responsibility, we're reliable. And I think another cherry on the top is probably the relationship skills that we have. I'm sort of very close to most of our clients. We have a very good working relationship. We don't work like we're clients. We work more like we're friends together. We're working towards a common goal. So a lot of our clients actually think of us as an extension to their business. We've got their email addresses. I'll have email addresses, Wahaj at whatever client I have. That's a level of trust they place with me and the team. So so I think these are a couple of things that I can think of. To be honest, I don't know what else.
No, that is amazing. That I know for sure will continue over time. I want to ask you about the common ground between our businesses is we work on monthly retainers, right? Like we as an advertising agency, you as a accounting and tax service provider. How do you structure your pricing, service, and how do you ensure that, because the retainer goes from month to month and there's a potential for a client to, even though they have high switching costs for you and for us as well, sometimes clients don't account for that when they want to go for a better deal or feel like they might get better quality, or they're seeing shiny stars somewhere else and they get pulled in. For example, for you, we can go with the big four because we're a bigger company now. We can hire them. How do you structure your pricing, your contracts in a way to get the longest term agreement with the client?
So there's a couple of ways to do that. We've had two instances where people did leave, and one of them went downwards to a cheaper firm. One of them went upwards, but they both came back within 3 months. And I think our quality is, if not better than the big four, it's very, very comparable. But in terms of pricing, it's a bit lower. So we're expensive, and when you compare us with a lot of our similar size firms, we're very expensive actually. But we're very closely priced to the big four, but we're a notch below. So in terms of cost savings, the way to think about it, and the way I convince our clients, is you're getting a big four quality for a bit lower than what you would pay for to any of these big fours. Also, we give our clients personalized attention. So we're not a mass market company like the big fours are, who take on a lot and then deploy people from other places in the region, or sort of take 3 days or 4 days to respond to an email and schedule a call or a meeting. We're pretty switched on. So you text us and we'll probably be calling you back in the next hour or so. So we're very quick, and that's something a lot of people appreciate,
especially here in Dubai.
Exactly, right? Because you're so used to getting everything instantly. But a lot of companies can't keep up with that because they've got a lot on their plate. And while we do have a lot on our plate, we're very actively engaged with our clients. We usually respond to anything within 24 hours, if not maximum 48 hours, because that's our internal SOP. Within 48 hours, you need to get back to the client with whatever feedback he or she wants. You need to set up a meeting, and so on. So a couple of things that we do a bit differently. Also, our contracts are structured a bit long-term. And we have these conversations with our clients saying, hey, we will deploy a lot of team on this. There's 2 people at the front, there's 2 people at the back, and there's 1 or 2 shadow members of the team. So I need appropriate time to sort of redeploy them if you were not to take my services anymore. And there's also an exit clause, which we haven't executed yet, thankfully, but it exists. So that sort of covers us a bit.
Can you talk about your exit clause? Because we were chatting just before we hit record, and I find that fascinating. Maybe the listeners can as well. It might seem obvious to you to have, but how do you structure that exit clause? How long is the term agreement, and how is the exit structured? And what's in it for you, and what's in it for the client?
So if it's not a one-off assignment like a health check or an internal audit, if it's a retainer base, which is about 90% of our clients, we offer them a better rate if they're to sign up on an annual or 2 years contract. So we apply a discount, which works out better for them. But in addition to the discount, what we also include is an exit clause. Think of it as a real estate contract where you have an annual rental agreement, and if you were to break that agreement mid-year, there'll be a penalty applied. So 2 to 3 months of penalty up until the time, or in addition to the time when until I've performed the services. We haven't executed it, so I'm not sure what it's going to look like, but everyone seems to be happy to sign it at this point. So that 3 months give me some room to sort of redeploy my team or look for other opportunities that come my way, and even
fill the gap, basically.
Exactly.
Somewhere. Yeah.
So that's how it works.
Alina, if you're listening, I wonder if we can do something like that. I told you, man. This guy is full of ideas. One thing I wanna say, it's probably not a question, but just an observation. Maybe questions in there too. One of the things I absolutely love about you, which is similar to people that I admire, is you have this ability to think really, really, really big, and you work your way backwards from that. But this has been a quality that I've seen for years and years and years, that your sights are set very high. And do you think you've always been like that? Is that something you've cultivated? Is it a result of people that you're around? Because just comparing it to, there's all kinds of business owners. There's those snake oil salesmen. There's the 2 month, I want to make a profit in 2 months kind of business person as well. There's hey, I'll give you 3 months free retainer if you sign on, just give me your business kind of retainer. But you have this ability to really go far, 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 far away. Is that something you practice regularly, like thinking big and getting big ideas? And have you always been getting them?
Yeah, I think ever since school. The positivity helps, right? So the way to think about and it applies to my personal life as well. You aim for the stars and you probably get to the sky, right? So if you just aim to get to the 10th floor, you're stuck at the 10th floor, but you'll get to some point if you're aiming a bit higher. So the aims and ambitions have always been something that are far too high. And then, like you said, I try and work backwards from it and see what I can do to get to that point. I don't always accomplish that, but I get very near to accomplishing that. And I think a lot of people sort of don't really appreciate the things that this market has to offer, or the comfort that this market has to offer, and so on. So I look at those things as a very, very positive sign. Dubai's got a lot to offer. You can grow, but you need to think big. Also, I think long-term helps you build that value and not just think of the dollar value today or tomorrow. It helps you think of the dollar value that it'll generate in about 10 years from now. And that's where my sights are set, right? So I might not be making a lot of money today, but when I have so many big names and clients' trusts backing me up, in about 5 years from now, I'd be one of the larger names in this industry. And maybe in 10 years from now, I'd probably be one of the largest names in the industry. So that's the way to think about these things. And yeah, just be very positive and believing that you'll achieve what you want to achieve.
Yeah. the person I was talking to before this show as well was mentioning something similar. There's another similarity between you guys as well. He's also an ex-boss of mine, just like you are. And it's not just about thinking big. So first of all, you think big and you set your sights there, and it kind of controls all your behavior from there on, because you've made some sort of a, commitment to your mind that this is what I'm thinking about, this is what I want to get. And everything you say and do and write and call and drive, it's all based on that, on making that happen. But the other part that is, it's easy to think big, but you guys, especially you two, you take action on everything that you think is a big idea. So it's not just a pie in the sky. And it's very uncanny how similar it is. You also think through decks. I've seen you do that. When you get a business idea, first of all, you go do your research, you put your notes together, and you start working on a PowerPoint and a business plan almost immediately. You work out the opportunity, how to make it happen, what the USP will be, what the target market will be, why you think there's an opportunity. Do you still do that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that hasn't changed.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a very imaginative mind when it comes to business ideas, right?
Especially at 2 a.m.
Yeah, especially at 2 a.m. And I'm probably thinking about something, I'm jotting down something, I'm drawing something on a notepad, and then that will eventually get transitioned into a PowerPoint. Or most recently, we started using Beautiful AI, which is amazing. Because that sort of helps you accomplish it, right? It's the next step towards either raising funds or laying out a roadmap on how to get to that place where you want to be. Because anything that's in your head is, first of all, very fluid. So it keeps changing and you might keep forgetting. And secondly, you're not taking any action. It's still a thought. So you have to put that thought onto a piece of paper, or you need to go and set up your own company and start doing it. So either or. So I start with the paper, and then eventually, Oblique was our first venture, and now branching out into technology space. So that is something that's coming up. And both of them have been the result of pitch decks, so can't really complain.
It clears, it acts as a method of thinking more than just like creating a PowerPoint. It's like you're clearing out your thoughts. You're understanding you yourself, what you're thinking about. How do you put that in action? Because you also do that very well. You don't just do the thinking, then, conceptualize the idea on a deck, but you actually assign like a few steps that happen afterwards. Is that always the case? Do you always like start moving towards an idea to figure out if it's going to work or not? And how do you figure out if you need to invest more time and energy into that idea?
So not always. There have been times when I've worked on a business idea, but realized after discussions with mentors or friends and peers that it probably is not a good idea at this point, or due to whatever reason, it's not a good idea at all, for example. So there have been instances where I've sort of scrapped a project and said, well, maybe not now, or maybe, never. But yes, in most cases, I do get going. I build something up, and if I believe in it, the belief comes from two elements mainly. The most important is research and feedback from various people in the industry that I'm planning to set something up, and as well as the challenges they face, and I sort of know that at least on paper, this is something that'll work. The other second part is the positivity and the gut. So I sort of know or get this feeling that this would eventually work out because it is a need in the market. And often when you talk to people, they don't really understand because they haven't seen that thing in play. So you have that mental head of that, those wireframes coming together. So you know that this will eventually be something that people will use. So they can't really picture it today, but they will at some point. So for example, our technology project, which is an automated tax bot, a lot of people ask me questions like, well, how are you going to be sure that it's always going to be accurate? The fact of the matter is our benchmarking is wrong. We're human beings. I can be wrong and my team can be wrong too. So we don't always have 100% assurity that will always be correct. And that applies to every company because everyone's got human beings working. So we're measuring that bot against something that's not really possible. So it'll get there eventually. but people need to have some faith and start using it. So I think that's what drives my thought process. Give them what I can give to them and see how they react. And eventually they'll start appreciating it because the product's going to get better and better.
Absolutely. Okay. We're getting close to the end of it, but before that, I have to get more selfish and ask more questions that I hope you can help me with, because they're agnostic to what business you're in. And first one is something that I personally struggle with, is having patience, right? So part of it you mentioned is like it's your optimism, but if you're working on a 10-year plan, you're not going to see results for 9.5 years. Right? That's just the nature of the risks you take in business, is that for a long time you're bleeding. You bleed on a daily basis, and then you win big at some point in the future, and you might not see the ship sailing towards its destination because it's too cloudy. But, once the sun moves around, you can see that you're actually going closer to the destination. So what would you say to me in terms of having patience? I'm 2 years in the business. I have big dreams and big plans. I'm anxious. I'm all the time. I'm just thinking like, where are the results? Where are the results? What do you have those thoughts? Or if you don't, what would you say to me to help calm me down?
So build a business plan for 30 years, and then those 9.5 years won't look too bad.
30 years.
So, yeah. And that's a third of it, right? So 2/3 of your future is secure, and it's positive and bright, right? So that's one way to look at it.
That's amazing.
There would always be times when you're anxious and when you're concerned about when the next revenue contract's going to be signed, when you're going to grow to a certain level, when can you hire, when can you expand, and so on. The fact of the matter is that being anxious or being stressed over it does not get you results. So moving from your chair and doing something about it will get you results. So that could be different for everyone. So it could be meeting people, it could be emailing people, it could be calling people, it could be seeking advice from mentors and so on. Works very differently for each person, but you have to do something about it to drive results. So if you sit at your desk and say, well, I'm not getting anything, then you're not doing anything to get anything. And when you keep trying, automatically the motivation is sort of like a snowball that starts to get going, and then you're like, well, I've spoken to 10 people, 3 of them seemed interested, hopefully one of them will sign, and even if they don't, well, after you touch 20, at least one of them will sign. So it is a process, but yeah, build a 30-year plan.
That's good. What I'm hearing from that, and tell me if this is right, if you're always taking some sort of action, there's very little gap time where this patience and anxiety settle in. So if you're always moving from one point of action to another point, you don't have time to sit and think negative thoughts, because you're always actually just moving.
Exactly.
Forward. Yeah.
And you're not sort of thinking about something negatively, because like you said, there's no room for it.
Yeah.
And because you're constantly doing something, you know that I am doing whatever I can.
Yeah.
And eventually at some point, this passion is going to reward me. So I'm going to hit that jackpot soon.
Yeah. Another thing that I struggle with is having that imposter syndrome. So we're always looking up to other people that have accomplished certain success in quotes, or a certain place in life. And because of the media, the way it is right now, there's no shortage of examples of people who are, at your stage or at your age, or, same background or different background, and they're out there achieving like millions of things. Part of that sometimes makes me feel like, oh crap, like how am I ever going to get to that level of, again, in quote, success? And that doesn't have to be money, but in general. Do you have those thoughts? Do you look at people that way? Because partially it's inspiring, right? It's you can find role models the same way, and you can set them as your North Star. But once in a while, again, it settles in like, okay, this person's really smarter than I am. They're really well connected more than I am. They have a different background more than I am, and I'm trying to do what they're trying to do. Will I ever get there? Do you have those kind of thoughts by looking at certain people in your life or your industry, or just in the general media? And how do you think about that?
That's a good question. So I am not very active on social media, so I don't, and that's what social media is sort of done, right? I mean, you sort of advertise everything and you sort of market everything far more greater than it truly is. And I don't necessarily see anything wrong with it. Everyone's got their own perspective of doing things. But for a lot of people, what that does is it gives them this complex that I'm not doing a lot. And I don't mean to refer to you. I'm just talking about generally. A lot of people believe that, hey, he's doing so much great stuff and I'm not. But the fact is that he's probably advertising it a lot more than you are. So he might not be actually accomplishing what you're thinking he's accomplishing. That is number one. Number two is success is defined very differently for each one of us, right? It's very different for me. It is very different probably for you, for my team, every individual person, right? We're 7 billion people on this earth. So if you even form part of 70 million, that's about 1%. And there's a lot of other people to cater to and provide services to. If, for example, you're in a B2C, so 70 million is a lot of people. You probably don't even see feedback from 100 people. But your success is something that comes from within. That could be money for some people. That could be, for example, for me, it's how I'm adding value and enriching someone's life and making his business easier, or making his goals more accomplishable, if that's a term. And that's how I sleep at night, right? So if I'm able to run a company that's profitable, if I'm able to be satisfied when I go to bed, that is success for me. And I'll continue to grow, but these elements won't change. I could make millions more in 5 years from now, and I will be happy. But if I'm not making a lot of millions, I'd still be happy because money is a bit lower in the priority list for me. But for a lot of people, it is big. So if you think of Elon Musk, he wanted to create something completely new, and he's accomplished that. For people who dream of doing something that big, maybe they have to think of things differently. But I don't think I want to impact that significant of a change. I want to do something within my industry, within this region, and be someone who's considered to be someone who's influenced change. And I hope I'm getting there.
Hopefully, you're one of the people that are going to make other people feel bad for where they are in their lives. I want to start wrapping up. Final two questions for you. Dubai. You've always been long Dubai. You've every time I've spoken to you, even though I was in Toronto, you were always bullish on Dubai, regardless of the amount of stories that are propagated, especially outside of this country, portraying the image of this place. What do you think Dubai offers, business owners, something that maybe the rest of the world doesn't, and why do you feel so confident about generally the system and the ecosystem here?
So several reasons. One, this is probably, if not the center, then very close to the center of the world, right? So it gives you a lot of gateway to approach any market that you want to approach. There's no corporate tax laws here, so you have a lot of there's a lot of room to sort of play around without having to worry about regulatory constraints that normally other markets you're worried about. And then you have corporate tax, double tax treaties and so on. That sort of causes an additional burden on new business. You don't have those strains here. You've got a slightly higher setup cost here. But once you pay that setup cost, the regulatory costs are almost nil. So that's a huge positive. Dubai has constantly shown to evolve itself, right? From pearl trading business to trading to port to DIFC, being a financial hub, to real estate, to export trading. And they've constantly come up with new initiatives that sort of reinvent themselves. They're trying to make businesses, entrepreneurs' life easier. For example, the startup licenses they've come up with, funding and so on. So I think it's a great place to be. It offers you a lot of luxury and comfort. Everything's available within a few hours, if not an hour. You get grocery delivered to your place. You get everything done. You queue up and you have a VIP service. You get your visa in like 4 hours and stuff. So everything's pretty easy when you compare it to Europe, where, if you were to hire an expat, you can't really do that. And your talent should be globally available. Doesn't matter where he is from or she is from. it should be at your fingertips. So that's something that Dubai does really beautifully.
And even one of the things that people have complained about in the past, that it's harder and more expensive to set up businesses. Who was it? I'm forgetting his name, but you had a friend in the UK that was running Innovate Tax.
Yeah, Andrew.
Andrew once told us at lunch that higher barrier to entry is not a bad thing. He's like, if you actually look at it, the non-serious people don't start businesses that way. And people who have more skin in the game and they have the ability to, overcome the initial hurdle of setting up a business should be the only ones allowed to set up a business. Otherwise, any Tom, Dick, and Harry would set up a business, and that's generally not good for the economy. Not everyone should attempt to start up shop, right? So even though it might be by design, maybe that's why they have had it that way for a long time, is to kind of have a qualification method.
Yeah, filtration process.
Filtration, exactly. Okay, lastly, Wahaj, what's your 30-year plan? Where are you going? What's going to happen? What's going to happen when you're 70 years old, 60 years old? Where are you headed?
Probably sipping a pina colada when I'm in West Indies or something. and at the Caribbean.
How are you going to get there?
By plane, hopefully. But yeah, I don't think I've got a 30-year plan chalked out, to be honest. But I've got a 10 to 15-year plan chalked out. And every passing year, I've got another 10, 15-year plan chalked out, right? So I think we're now moving into the technological space of our business. And I think that's one of the things I want to make sure runs and is established on autopilot, which should hopefully change the advisory world greatly as it's seen today. That is one of the greatest plans. And while we can kickstart that off in about a year or two, but for it to reach its peak maturity, it's probably going to take half a decade or maybe a bit more, just under a decade. That coupled with a couple smaller technology ideas is something I want to work on. And maybe at some point when I've accomplished those goals, also want to set up sort of a school in Pakistan or maybe even Africa, I don't know, but Pakistan most likely because I belong from there, which sort of teaches you the interpersonal soft skills and so on. So maybe a couple of charity
We've talked about that a lot.
Yeah, I know. So that's something that's on the horizon, right? Because you see a lot of smart individuals coming out that lack that interpersonal skills because they're not exposed to it or because they haven't had the opportunity to experiment. So those are things that I probably want to accomplish in about 10 to 15 years.
Well, I'll be following that journey as always and keeping track. I'll probably be the guy that writes your documentary by the time you're sipping pina coladas in Barbados. Thank you so much for coming on. This was really helpful for me. I hope you had fun.
Thank you. I did.
Cool. If people want to reach out to you, are they allowed to email you? Can I share your email in the show notes?
Sure. Go for it.
Okay. Well, thanks again for coming. Nice chat. I'll see you soon.
See you, man.
All right, thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed that conversation. Please do share this episode with someone you think will enjoy it as much as you did. To find out who else will be coming on or to recommend someone I should talk to, please follow my Instagram. It's at My First Business Podcast, or go to the website myfirstbusinesspodcast.com. And that's all, folks.